Good morning and welcome. I am Virginia Rudder. I am the Manager of Community Relations for Clean Energy Economy Minnesota, or CEEM. And today we are talking about projects in Northeast Minnesota. I want to give a thank you to our sponsors, All Energy Solar, Evergreen Energy, Larkin Hoffman, and TruNorth Solar, and also to our partners at the Economic Development Association of Minnesota Clean Energy Resource Teams for sharing out our presentation today. During today's webinar, all attendees will be muted, and we encourage you to submit questions to our panelists through the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you use the drop-down to view active cameras, it'll keep your screen a little cleaner. And today we're recording our webinar. We'll make a recap blog and also a highlight video. So you can find that on our website in the upcoming weeks. And we would really appreciate your feedback on today's webinar. This is our 5th in the series of virtual roadshows, but I'd still love to hear your thoughts on today's presentation. So again, I am Virginia Rudder with Clean Energy Economy Minnesota, or CEEM. I will start our presentation today with trends across the state on both clean energy generation and jobs. And then we will go to our panel of clean energy projects, starting with Marty Morud of TruNorth Solar, and then Mindy Granley of the City of Duluth, and Ken Smith, Evergreen Energy, and ending with Braden Solum from Ideal Energies. At that point, we'll have our panel discussion, and I look forward to receiving your questions again through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. CEEM is a nonprofit that has been around since 2016, so we're about 5 years old, and we provide the business voice for clean energy. So we bring that and use this voice to shape our policy conversation here in Minnesota and to provide a lot of education around the impact and the importance of our clean energy industry in the state. We are a business-led nonprofit, so we have more than 40 members who are startup companies, Fortune 100 and 500 companies, educational institutions who all have large operations here in Minnesota. And they range across technologies as well, from energy efficiency through clean energy generation. So I would like to start with an overview of 2 of the reports that we put out every year, the Minnesota State Energy Fact Sheet and Clean Jobs Midwest. We're going to start with a little video about the fact sheet.
The 2021 Minnesota Energy Fact Sheet shows the state is undergoing a dramatic clean energy transition, setting new milestones in clean energy deployment and a commitment to energy efficiency. In 2020, and for the first time, renewables were the leading source of electricity generation in Minnesota. A key factor for this can be attributed to the creation of 588 megawatts of new capacity, all from clean, renewable energy sources. Ranking first in the Midwest for energy efficiency in 2020, the state's energy productivity has grown 24% since 2011. And Minnesota's power sector emissions have fallen 40% over the last decade. In that time, natural gas used for electricity tripled, while coal use fell by half. Prior to the pandemic, nearly 62,000 Minnesotans worked in clean energy. Those jobs were growing 2.5 times faster than the rest of the economy. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, over 9,000 clean energy workers lost their jobs. Clean energy can help Minnesota's economy get back in business. Get the facts about Minnesota's energy and where it is heading. Download the 2021 Minnesota Energy Fact Sheet today.
So these are some of my favorite facts from the fact sheet. So the renewable energy generation was our #1 source of electricity generation last year. For the very first time, we had 29% of our electricity from renewable sources. And if you add in nuclear, then we had the majority of our electricity from zero carbon sources, which I think is super exciting. And as a result of this, our power sector emissions have fallen 40% in the last decade. We're still not quite meeting our goals for that, for our greenhouse gas reductions in the state, but I think we're making good progress. Minnesota corporations have been joining this effort and have signed contracts to purchase renewable power for 1.3 gigawatts of capacity. And these are companies like Target, Cargill, General Mills, and Ecolab. So big movers in our Minnesota economy. As you had heard, we only built renewable power plants last year, which I think is really great. And part of this is the costs have come down so much. So wind power is now the cheapest source of new electricity generation in the state, outcompeting natural gas. We are also a very big state for energy efficiency, first in the Midwest and 9th in the nation. And this is really due to our strong policies in Minnesota with our Conservation Improvement Program and the new Energy Conservation and Optimization, or ECO Act. And we're also seeing a lot of new electric vehicle adoption in Minnesota, up to like 5 or 6 times in the last 5 years. So it's exciting to see those trends here in our state. So looking at the jobs in the sector, as you heard in the video, we lost jobs last year. I think this is kind of something that went across the economy. The pandemic has been a big challenge. And so we did end up losing 6,500 jobs. So the statistics at the end of that video changed a little bit. We rebounded at the end of last year. So it's we ended with 55,300 jobs in the clean energy industry in Minnesota. Nearly 40% of these jobs are found outside of the metro, so roughly proportional to the population. And these jobs are really driven by our small businesses. So 71% of the jobs in clean energy are found in businesses with fewer than 20 employees. Energy efficiency is our largest sector with 75% of these jobs. And these jobs range from HVAC, whether that's traditional or high efficiency, lighting, and building controls. And for a comparison, wind jobs are about 2,500 jobs in the wind industry subsector, and we have about 4,500 jobs in solar. And our renewable energy generation sector in total lost jobs. The wind industry grew last year 8%, which is exciting. A lot of that was due to the production tax credit supposedly ending at the end of 2020. And it did get extended, but everybody rushed to get those projects done at the end of last year. But I think it's a good thing to see this subsector grow. This is a fun fact that in Minnesota, there are more clean energy workers than the number of lawyers, accountants, and auditors, web developers, and real estate agents combined. And as I had said, these jobs span across our state, including all of our congressional districts. So you can see up here in Congressional District 8, we have more than 4,000 jobs in the clean energy industry. So now I'd like to invite Marty Morud of TruNorth Solar to start his presentation on solar in Cook County.
Thanks, Virginia. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. And first off, hi, everybody. Welcome to our CEEM event here this morning, and big thanks to Virginia for dealing with my tardy slides/photos that I emailed late last evening. I could never put together slides like Amelia and Virginia and everybody at CEEM has done. Those are really cool, and my slides would look just terrible. So I sent photos, and I'm going to try to tell you a little story about TruNorth and kind of our involvement up in the Arrowhead with respect to solar projects. So Virginia, you can just kind of scroll through some photos here, and I can point out a couple of ones as we go. I think most of the photos I provided, I tried to get photos of people and our people working on solar projects, because this is really a story about people and clean energy and bringing it to this area of the state, this beautiful area of our state. So back in 2014 and 2015, along with Energy Concepts, we partnered with them to bring solar to Arrowhead Utility and Co-op Light and Power. We had just bought this post driver on a Bobcat that supposedly could get around or through big boulders and rocks. That's not true. But our first involvement in the Northeast was building those utility scale projects behind Arrowhead and CLP. We spent a whole day removing a rock the size of a small car underneath that Co-op Light and Power site. And I think I got a photo of that coming up here that I'll point out too. Yeah, so this is the Arrowhead project. If you go one more, Virginia, or a few more, these are all photos of us building these pretty sizable projects for 2014 and 2015. So then in 2017, we contracted with Gardner Builders and the Wolf Ridge Environmental Learning Center to add solar, both solar thermal and solar PV, to their campus. As many of you know, Wolf Ridge is an environmentally internationally recognized leader in environmental education. And just last week, I'll post this link in the chat a little bit later, they were acknowledged internationally to receive the very first Living Building Challenge certification of a retrofit at their MAC Lodge. And this is huge, it's a several-year project for them. It involves several energy efficiency and renewable energy components to the build, but that's a huge thing to have a first ever in the world up in the Northeast portion of our state. So I'll send a link to that so you can learn more. Rocks were also present there in that installation. So then we started getting calls from the Grand Marais area. This gentleman called back in like 2017, and he wanted solar in his house. And it was weird communicating with him because he was never home. Of course, a lot of folks have cabins up in the area. And then we learned that he's actually in Germany, because we kept on getting emails in the middle of the night. And it was this weird project, really cool project, where he just said, if you guys could show up and build solar at my house, I'm not going to be there, but just go do it. And we did, and we ran into more rocks, but we got through it. And then their neighbor wanted solar. He was the owner of the Pincushion Bed and Breakfast in Grand Marais. And it was just this interesting transformation of 1 by 1 and 2 by 2, and all of a sudden 7 by 7. We were getting phone calls and opportunities to build solar up in the Grand Marais and Lutzen area. And the interesting thing for my staff was I'd reach out to them and say, okay, we got another project in the North Shore. It's a long ways away. It's a bit of traveling. Is anybody interested? And bam, every hand goes up. And I thought, it kind of dawned on me that not only could we bring solar to this corner of the state, but it's almost like a mini retreat for our employees. And they just loved it. I think when we did these 7 projects, we did 7 projects in 12 days. We rented out the B&B. Our team went cliff jumping one day and hiking another day. And of course, they're enjoying dinners and the bars, I'm sure, as well. So it's just, it's kind of a place that I go personally, and I know others do, to kind of get that reset. And we get to flip switches on clean energy all along. So that's kind of where we are right now. I also want to highlight CCLEP, the Cook County Local Energy Project organization up there. They've been great to work with, and they've brought several. This is the Co-op Light and Power project there. There's a very large rock that was under there and no longer is, by the way. But CCLEP is working on energy efficiency projects, some training and education, as well as commercial size projects. They're paying for local electricians to get their MREA solar installer training certificates, which is awesome. And now in this next cohort of projects we're going to be building next spring and summer in the Grand Marais area, we're partnering with them. You kind of need to build a volume. You can train people in, but if there isn't the jobs there and the projects for them to get hands-on learning, it really doesn't go anywhere. So we have names and numbers of a couple of those folks that finished that training, and we're going to blend our team and their team so they can get some practical on-site knowledge. Plus, you know, it's 5 hours away. And if we need to switch out an inverter or optimizer, something goes down, it'll be real nice to work with some local folks up there to do some service calls if we need it. Given where solar is going to grow in the next decade for Minnesota, we need to be as productive and efficient as we possibly can to flip all these switches and working with local parties. We're not known for subcontracting any of our work, but this is the perfect opportunity to work with others in the local area and you know, flip more switches on clean energy. So, and you can see the growth pattern there of projects in Cook County. So we're proud to be a part of that and hope to be a continuing part of that growth. So in closing, solar is, you get some great utilities up there that are very supportive of solar, especially allowing solar production and off-peak metering at the same time. I think there's one utility that's still kind of refusing campus-wide solar through really, I think the bastardization of the PURPA, you know, rule and trying to use that to the disadvantage of growing renewables. I get pretty ticked off when I see things like that happening, but hopefully that gets cleared up soon and we can build some larger projects in the Northeast and have some campus solar. But also the fact that the workforce is coming along with this growth is a huge advantage to Northeast Minnesota. So that's my interest in growing more projects up there, but also working collectively with local electricians so we can build a team of installers in the area. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions kind of later in our webinar here. Thanks, Virginia.
Thanks, Marty. All right, I am going to now invite Mindy and Ken up to speak about the project with the City of Duluth and Evergreen Energy. Let me get my screen, that slideshow up again.
While you work on that, I'll just say hello. I'm Mindy Granley. I'm the City of Duluth Sustainability Officer, which is a new position in our city. And I've been at the job about, I think, 19 months or something like that. And then I'm here with Ken Smith.
Well, good morning. I'm Ken Smith. I'm President and CEO of Evergreen Energy and been involved in Duluth and the district system now for 9 years. So I'm excited to share the story. So we got a slide up here. Evergreen Energy first got involved in the operation of the system about 9 years ago. The city was looking to transition the operation and move the system forward. And we were excited to do that because the city was committed to making it more efficient and moving towards renewables. It's a, as you see, 1932 vintage system, so it's 90 years old. We got involved and it was 80 years old, serves a lot of buildings in downtown Duluth, including the hospitals. When we first got involved in the project, we put together a master plan working with the city on how we could move the system forward. And they had Superior Street was going to be completely rebuilt, in part because of the aging infrastructure, the water and wastewater piping underneath the street. And that was the main corridor for the steam system. The steam system was once through, so it was coal-fired predominantly, could use natural gas. The economics didn't work for natural gas. So it was coal-fired, once through steam, heat city water, which is coming from Lake Superior to high temperature pressure steam, sent it out to the buildings, and then hot water was going down the sewer. So this would transition that to being a closed loop system. And initially it was 12 blocks of piping that was replaced in 3 years. And then we had extension of the hot water piping occurred this summer down to the hospitals and all the work that's going on in the hospital district. And so you see a total of 16, 16 blocks of piping and end up closing the loop. Move to the next slide. The results have been outstanding. So where coal was the predominant source of energy, it is now regulated to a backup fuel. We're utilizing natural gas and coal when we need to on the coldest days, certainly when we have to test the boilers to operate on coal, but it's in excess of 90% or excess of 80% now reduction in the usage of coal. Greenhouse gas emissions are down. The buildings that have transitioned to hot water, and we've got a number that have transitioned to hot water this year, are saving on the average of 26%. Some are savings much more than that. And the water usage of the overall system is down significantly. When we did the project, it was done in 3 phases for the first 12 blocks, each end and then in the middle where the plant interconnects. And when we connected that middle section, the amount of energy that was saved that was previously being lost by the distribution system is actually more than one of the largest customers of the system. So the energy savings have been tremendous, which then is, because it's owned by the city, the benefits are going back to the customers. We're over to Mindy.
Yeah, and beyond all of the sort of environmental benefits of the upgrade to the thermal district, the project also supplied a lot of local jobs, lots of different industries in design and construction, and lots of partners in the engineering sector as well. So as part of the Superior Street project, Evergreen Energy was involved in the hot water pipes being laid on those 16 blocks of our downtown district. Many of their St. Paul employees were engaged in that project, but pretty much everyone of the 20 employees that work in the Duluth Energy Systems building itself were involved as well. And one other side benefit of this project was the project, as a City of Duluth project, had to meet and report on community benefits, which is a program that helps get women and individuals who are considered socially disadvantaged into the job force. And so that includes people of color, low-income workers, individuals who might be homeless or at risk, disabled veterans, people who receive public benefits, or individuals with a criminal background. And so of the reported hot water transition employees hours worked, we had over 8,400 hours reported, and of those, about 11% were disadvantaged workers. So that's just a little side benefit of the project. Next. And finally, the thermal district upgrade reset this huge community assets lifespan. It provided a lot of efficiencies, which also will allow us to keep working on other things, such as finding ways to decarbonize. So with this new platform of hot water, there will be more opportunity to explore biofuels, waste heat recovery, and where we might be able to integrate renewables as well. So it really gives us this new platform for the next phase of its lifespan. The project began before I started at the city. So I get here when we get to celebrate the results. And one of the first things that I did when I learned about all of the benefits, both environmental and social benefits and the jobs, I decided to nominate this project for the 2021 Environmental Initiative Awards. And we forgot to put it in the slide, but I'll hold it up to the camera. Here's our award. We were able to win the Energy and Climate Award for our project, which we called Decarbonizing Duluth, Duluth Energy Systems Transformation. So just a little side benefit. Next. And of course, the thermal district is only part of how the city of Duluth is working on climate mitigation and adaptation. We've had some local leadership on climate action. In fact, in 2017, Mayor Emily Larson signed us into the Climate Mayor's Agreement and the We're Still In Agreement, which committed the city to reducing our emissions 80% by 2050, which is in alignment with the Paris Agreement goal. And then in 2020, our city council took on declaring a climate emergency, which urged us to both accelerate those goals and then also to exceed them and expand from just city emissions out to our community. So we've really got some leadership that are asking us to do our part. How this will happen will likely provide many jobs over its lifespan, but we will be working on energy efficiency, conservation, and renewables, of course, but also adapting our infrastructure to the changing climate. How do we handle more precipitation, warmer weather, rain on snow events, more extreme weather, more extreme winds, that kind of thing. And so between all of our infrastructure and water, wastewater, stormwater, our buildings, and our streets, there's a lot of work ahead to make sure we're ready for the climate of our future. As part of that, we'll also be challenged with taking care of our natural areas and open spaces, things like augmenting our tree canopy in the city and using and adopting more green infrastructure to treat stormwater runoff. So likely there'll be jobs created by those actions as well. And then finally, in mitigation, a focus on transportation, which our first step internally within the city is to really look at our city fleet. So we operate a fleet of hundreds of vehicles between cars and trucks and snowplows and plumbing trucks, et cetera. But how do we work on that? So we've got a fleet work group that we formed to help look at what kind of vehicle replacement policies we can adopt to encourage hybrid and electric vehicle adoption. So just a quick overview of what's to come in the city of Duluth. Thank you.
I'll take the last slide. So to give you a sense of what district energy systems can do, they're actually being utilized quite extensively globally in order to cut carbon emissions and for communities of all scales to meet their climate objectives. The system that was in place, these are different generations. So you can see across the top, first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation. The system that was in place in Duluth when we started was first generation. You can see that 1888 to 1930s technology, once through very inefficient system. But we've been able to move all the way over to between third generation and really fourth generation, and that by putting in the piping systems we have and closing the loop, we can now start integrating in a variety of technologies. So while we've moved to natural gas, this is a step forward. It's not the end. It is a beginning. And now we are actively looking at how can we put in other forms of energy that would be low to no carbon, including electrification, whether it's waste heat recovery or some other form of energy source. If you could advance that slide. District energy systems are all over the place in the state of Minnesota, and certainly up in this part of the state. Most of the college and university campuses have some form of district energy on them. University of Minnesota Duluth has a system, for example. Most of the MnSCU campuses have district energy systems, and also private businesses as well. And so as you are advancing these systems and looking to decarbonize them, to the extent that you can reduce the temperature, you reduce the fuel usage or the energy usage and greenhouse gas emissions, you increase the efficiency and allows you to blend in a variety of technologies, and including renewable energy. So as we do this work in Minnesota, but across the US, it's this kind of movement of legacy systems like you have in Duluth, moving them forward so they can start decarbonizing, or the new systems that we're putting in are these fourth generation where you're going with low temperature systems and often geo exchange, where you're using ground source heat pumps or some kind of a wasted energy stream from industry as an energy source. Look forward to the questions that come forward. Just to Marty's comments about boulders. Oh yeah, we hit them too when you're digging in the streets of Duluth. And I think that's probably appropriate, that it takes a lot of boulder movement. You got to move some rocks in order to move forward with clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy and Ken. Now I'd like to invite Braden up, and let me get your project or your screen up here too.
Good morning, everyone. All right, yeah, so it looks like the formatting changed a little bit there. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about, so our company, Ideal Energies, I'll tell you a little about us in a second, but I'm going to be talking about some projects that we did with the Hinckley-Finlayson School District. We did 3 projects with them over the last year and a half. And I'm going to tell you a little bit what those meant for the district, and then some other opportunities for school districts to install solar over the next about year and a half. So you can go to the next slide. So yeah, about us, I'll do this quickly, but yeah, we've been around since 2010. We are a strictly commercial solar company, so we don't do residential projects, but we do about half our work in the public sector and half in the private sector. So we've done a lot of school buildings, city buildings, as well as just businesses around the metro area and around the state. I can go to the next one. So yeah, so I'm talking about what we call behind the meter solar. So this is kind of similar to the way a residential solar project would work, just on a bigger scale. So not like what Marty was talking about, where they're installing solar arrays that go directly into the grid, which then gets sold to customers. What we do is we install solar on the roof or ground of a commercial building, and that energy then flows into the building, powering that building. And then the leftover energy, when the solar isn't providing enough, is pulled from the grid. And if ever there is too much solar going into the building, some of that energy gets sent back to the grid. Next slide. So yeah, with Hinckley-Finlayson, we did 3 schools. First, we did the high school. This was in Minnesota Power territory, and we used what they call the Solar Sense program. It's an incentive program that gives some money up front to help us finance these projects, to be able to give these schools some financial benefit immediately with the systems. The Solar Sense program is now, it's been kind of defunded, and the incentive rates have dropped below a point where it makes sense for commercial projects. It's more of kind of a residential program now, but I'll tell you about some other programs that are coming down the line. The next project we did was Hinckley Elementary. This is the identical system to the one we did on the high school. And then the third system that we did was Finlasson Elementary. And this one was actually not in Minnesota Power. So there was no incentive program for this system. It was East Central Energy. And this is a 40 kilowatt AC system, 53.6 kilowatt DC, which is the highest we can go, and still being able to net meter the electricity. So being able to sell the electricity back, that the excess electricity produced at the retail rate that the customer pays for electricity. In this case, their electricity rates were high enough that we were able to do our financial model without incentives involved. But for many cases in schools outside of Xcel Energy territory where the incentives are quite high, this has made it hard to do projects on school buildings. Next slide here. So economics wise, what this meant for the districts is, with the incentives plus the energy rates that we were able to offset, we were able to do this for the schools with no upfront cost to the districts. We were able to finance them. And the way that works is the district then purchases the energy that's produced by the solar array for a term. The term is typically between 20 and 25 years, depending on the incentives that are available for the project. And so they do that at a discount. So we set up the energy rate that they pay to be less than what they're currently paying for electricity. And then once that term is finished, all the energy produced by the arrays is free for the remaining life of the arrays. So in this case, across these 3 projects, where we were going to be able to save the district $350,000 in energy expense savings over 30 years. Under these models, we also operate and maintain the solar arrays for the districts that we do. So it's pretty hands-off from their perspective. I like to tell people to view it as a glorified HVAC unit on their rooftop. And then the panels themselves, things like that, have a 25-year warranty. So the system has quite a long lifespan that we install. Another thing that we did for this district is that our company worked alongside some educators to create a STEM education curriculum that aligns to current standards, that was able to be implemented into their schools. So they're able to use the solar arrays that they have on their rooftop as a teaching tool in the classroom. Then the final thing that we did is we installed a monitoring platform. So this is what they use to be able to use these as a teaching tool. So the schools are able to monitor their electricity. They can see the environmental benefits that they're offsetting at live. So it's just like a web page that the school can go to. They can use it on iPads in the classroom, and you can see clouds come over and impact the solar array's performance and things like that, which we think is really cool. So the incentive program, like I said, SolarSense was kind of defunded a bit. And for a lot of other utilities, there just aren't incentives for schools to install solar. And so in 2021, this year, this is something we're really excited about. There was this legislation called the Solar for Schools program that passed that allowed $8 million in financial incentives for schools outside of Xcel Energy territory. So pretty much the whole greater Minnesota area to install systems that are about the size that I just showed you that we did for Hinckley-Finlayson. This program is still kind of being promulgated. The Department of Commerce is going to be proposing their first kind of go ahead at the program, I think on the 18th. And so we'll see what these incentives look like, kind of how the program is structured. Then it will open in January 2022. But what we're really excited about this program, because we've done a ton of solar on schools in Xcel Energy territory where the incentives are high and very little in greater Minnesota, which will open up the opportunity for the entire northeast of Minnesota school districts to be able to install some solar on their campuses. There are some requirements of that, like the schools need to integrate the solar array as a teaching tool into the classroom, which we're pretty excited about. And then they do require that there's some live energy monitoring available in a public place, which is pretty easy, as it's something that we and most companies already offer. And then if there, I mean, Xcel does kind of go up into the Northeast a bit. So there is a program in Xcel too. So the total legislation that was passed was actually, it was 800,000 for outside of Xcel and 800,000 for inside of Xcel. The only difference is that inside of Xcel, the systems are allowed to be quite a bit larger. So instead of 40 kilowatts, they're able to go up to 1 megawatt. Again, Xcel has just proposed this program before the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce has yet to rule on what it will look like. So again, we're kind of in a holding pattern at the moment to see how this program will work for school districts. But we are very excited about it. And we're hoping that this money will be able to install solar on schools across the state. And again, the requirements are very similar to the previous program for outside of Xcel Energy territory. And that's all I've got for these projects. We were really excited to partner with Hinckley-Finlayson. And yeah, if any other schools in the Northeast with these new programs, it'll probably be a great fit for them. So we're excited to see some schools go solar.
Thanks, Braden. I'd now like to invite all of our panelists to turn their cameras back on, and we can start to take questions from the audience. So let's start with this first one. Marty, for you, there are two. One, interested in that conversation about the larger scale solar and whether there's been any analysis done on land that would be good for that up in Cook County. And another question about the experience working with local utility or the local utilities up there on those solar projects.
Yeah, good question. Actually, CCLEP has been working on a large commercial storage project along with Arrowhead, which had appeared to be promising at first, but is on hold now because Arrowhead and GRE changed how the timing of when they look at incident peak demand. They changed it to like from once a week or something like that to multiple times a week, and that really threw off the project. On top of that, with this Build Back Better legislation that's going on, there may be a storage specific tax credit, which would also move a project like that forward. So that's one example of a project that's kind of started and halted, but it's still there. And, just like Kevin reminded us again, you got to move these boulders, you got to, it takes time, it takes work. We're pretty close on partnership with this, partnering with the city of Grand Marais to install, a couple hundred kW on kind of a PPA stage. The hard thing, and like Arrowhead and Co-op Light and Power, they're tied to GRE and they're restricted on the amount of renewables they can purchase. So GRE is really controlling, they have an allowance like a megawatt or 1.5 megawatts, and that's the max that they can install. So some utilities are teaming up and aggregating their allowance together, but I understand that there's a lot of disagreement between the co-ops and GRE, which will come to light here in the next 12 months as well. So we'll see where that goes. Right now, there's ideas, there's work being done on large projects. I wish the utilities would just say, hey, let's do it together. But, they haven't, through their own agreements that have been in place for decades and how long it takes to change those, as well as a few misrepresenting PURPA's intent. Large scale solar in the Northeast hasn't been an easy path forward. I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit.
And then that second one was about your experience working with utilities, I assume on the smaller scale.
On the smaller scale, it's great. The fact that you can call somebody at Arrowhead or Grand Marais Public Utilities and somebody picks up right away or returns your call, or, hey, what size is this transformer, whatever. It's incredibly easy to work with them. And Arrowhead's got a great board, a lot of renewable enthusiasts on the board. And so they just support it wholeheartedly between at least those two utilities. The response time is great. So yeah, and they want to encourage it, which is nice as well. There are, and I think there's a question there about siting as well. There are good sites up there, it's just when you're dealing with bedrock all the time, it can be expensive. But there's ways around it. You can ballast systems on top, you can dig down, you can pin posts and stuff. Like on our Wolf Ridge project, we had to excavate down, drill into the bedrock and sink rebar with an epoxy, but we think that's kind of strange, up there, it's just everyday life. So all the more reason to hire local folks, right? They know what the heck they're doing up there.
Ken and Mindy, there's a question about your Duluth project. First, they say it's impressive. They would like to know about the biggest challenges and how you overcame them.
Well, biggest challenge really on the project was that the Superior Street project needed to move forward, and it was putting together the funding to get it done. So it was a combination of things. It was some of it funded by customers, some of it was funded by the legislature, because you really, when you tore up Superior Street, you were going to impact the steam system. And do you just replace the steam system with like, or do you move the system forward into the future? So it took some time to figure that out. And really the Mayor Larson, the city, she was just fantastic in taking up that leadership role and figuring out a way to get that done. So the city worked together. We worked together with the city to figure out the timing, the phasing, getting the resources together. And then it's just a multi-year project. So there's just a lot of coordination that needed to occur between the building owners that were going to be transitioning, the work that was going on the street. You have a very short construction season. So the streets being opened up, you've got water, wastewater lines, power lines, there's just a lot that's going on in a very short period of time. And then, the first year we had a lot of rain, which was disruptive to the construction. So it's just the normal things that occur. They're just heightened a bit in that part of the state just because of the pretty short construction season that you get to deal with. And you've got to have building heat. So it was working around, how do we have temporary heating? How do we actually make sure that customers are taken care of while we're in the midst of taking this 80-year-old infrastructure out and replacing it with new infrastructure that's going to work into the future. It was a big effort. But then after we got through the first season, things got better because everybody knew what to expect. And then worked over that for 4 years.
Ken, you had talked about there being district heating systems at universities across our state. Are there similar opportunities for converting these district heating systems in other cities in Minnesota?
Yes. Many of the systems that are across the state are steam systems. Oftentimes those are getting up in years. As you're building buildings, a number of those systems, the building is hot water, but the system serving it is steam, and they're just transitioning it with a heat exchanger. So that's part of it. Is you're looking towards the future, where you have campuses, where you have these thermal grids already in place. They do present opportunities to transition them and then integrate renewables. So you think about the Duluth now. So you've got 160 buildings, including 2 hospital complexes that are integrated together with hot water. If we could put in renewables to serve all of that, you have just decarbonized all of those buildings. Much harder to do that on a building by building basis. So we have opportunities across the state where we have thermal grids already connecting buildings together to start laying out a plan. How do you decarbonize these going forward? You got to take steps oftentimes to transition away from steam. And then you also look at what kind of wasted energy streams do you have around you that could be utilized as an energy source. There's lots of opportunity in Minnesota.
Braden, a couple questions from the audience for you. Wondering what the percentage production of those schools, how much of their load these solar systems are covering?
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I do know that it's relatively small compared to the size of the load. We are limited when you're outside of Xcel Energy territory. We're limited to the net metering statutes in the state of Minnesota. So essentially every utility has to do retail net metering, which is the buying back the sale of excess energy at a full rate. Anything when you go above 40 kilowatts, they buy energy back at what they call their the word's escaping me right now. It's essentially just a wholesale power rate. There are avoided capacity costs, that's what they call it. So we're limited to do projects that are under 40 kilowatts AC, 40 or under kilowatts AC. So for a school, that's typically probably around 5, maybe 10% on some smaller schools, their load. So yeah, we are limited, but there is still some opportunity to do solar out there.
And then another question on how you work with school boards, and is it a challenging process to educate them on solar as a cost-effective energy solution, or are they generally excited and on board?
Yeah, that is very much a case-by-case basis. I have been in front of school boards where everybody has been across the board excited to do solar. They're like, we've been waiting for this. Thank you for providing a solution. We're so excited to do this. And then I've been in front of school boards that are very much divided, where people have maybe even some kind of outdated ideas about solar, or think it might be dangerous, or think it might be a nuisance in the community, or are worried how it's going to impact the grid. And then it's just spending time. For some districts, I've gone to 5 or 6 board meetings to just address concerns that people have. I've never had a school board say no in the end, but I have definitely had some challenging conversations with some school board members before. Some people who are just flat out against solar completely as an idea. And then typically though, once you kind of walk them through how it works financially, and how it actually saves the school money, I typically will lean on people that are kind of against solar. I lean pretty heavily on the economics. and the jobs aspect of it. Talking about things like how CEEM put out that report where it's the fastest growing job title in Minnesota is solar installer. People get excited about jobs, and they also just get excited about the school district saving money. I think we'd probably have a lot more pushback if we weren't able to provide savings instantly to school districts. But yeah, it's really across the board different for every district that we come across.
I'd just add to that, Braden, having worked at a university system, anytime you can free up operational costs to then do other upgrades or other projects, that's really great. And what your solar allows schools to do is really free up some more of their operating budget for other projects.
Mhm.
So that's a really important thing. Thanks for bringing that up today.
So kind of building on that motivation piece, for all of you, I guess, on this, looking at these kinds of projects, do you find that the primary motivator are those savings? Or is it, looking at decreasing carbon or other sustainability goals?
I think it kind of depends customer to customer. In the private sector, we see a really heavy financial message. So when I'm talking to companies in the metro area or around the state that want to put solar on their campuses or their buildings or their grounds, they focus heavily on, how long will this take to pay for itself? What are my savings? And then they compare it to, if I invest this money in just my normal day-to-day operation of my business, I'm going to make more, or is the solar going to make me more? And then they make a decision, mostly financially. We do get some customers who say, my suppliers, my customers are pushing me to do renewables, so I kind of need to do this. But in the public sector, people are more excited about the environmental message than the financial message, is what I found.
I would say for our work, economics play a role in every project. And oftentimes it's the number one item. And then the environmental side comes in. And so if you can accomplish both, you often can, that's a driver. So sometimes they're led by the values of we want to cut carbon emissions, but economics play in every single project we're engaged in. If you can't show that it's close or there's a net benefit, it has to be some kind of a need that's being met.
Having been in the industry for 12 years now, it's been interesting to see the progression of questions that clients or just, folks ask. I remember in 2011, 2012, volunteering at the state fair at the Eco Building, and most of the folks that came up would say, it doesn't work in Minnesota. They kind of heard about it in California as an idea, but this doesn't work here, does it? And then the next year, the question started coming in as, well, how does it work? They kind of accepted that it is something. So they wanted to learn more about how does it work? Then the question became, how much does it cost? And I feel more and more today, it's how do I get started? As I'm sure Braden experiences, more and more school boards have accepted the technology. They're interested, they want to see the economics. And I think everybody wants to make an intelligent financial decision. That's present in all conversations, but it all starts with some momentum of doing their part, doing the right thing, if they can make it happen financially, which is why financing is such a huge part of every project, residentially, commercially, utility scale. Affordable financing is key to all of these projects and driving the cost down over time. But I just feel like now every conversation we have starts with so much more momentum, really starts on the yes path to solar. Whereas, years ago, we had to fight so hard to get people on that yes path. So.
Great. And then our last question, talking about the workforce and kind of bringing people into the industry. So what kind of skills do people need to get jobs in our clean energy industry? How can we prepare them for the workforce and get them trained? Or what advice would you give to people who want to come into our clean energy space?
Well, I've said for years that we hire rock climbers and farm kids. And like, if you see that on a resume, you get a pretty quick response. Because a lot of these skills can be taught on site, in the field. And you start out as kind of a material handler, and you kind of work into that more hands-on installer role, more hardcore electrical apprentice. We're seeing now some of our first, folks that we hired 4 and 5 years ago hit their 6,000 and 8,000 hour marks and sit for the Minnesota Journeyman's Test. And the reason they got on that path was their interest in renewables and solar. So the career path looks very promising. It takes time. I still think there's a number of folks that come in and say, oh, renewable jobs pay really, really well, and it's kind of about the money. It's hard work. It's a construction job. You have to move boulders. You have to carry ballast blocks. You have to tie yourself to a roof for a living. So I think, that rock climbers and farm kids is a meaningful answer to that. It's a work ethic. It's a work hard, but it's also a play hard culture and environment. And it's very satisfying work as well, knowing that you're flipping all these switches on clean energy. But for the most part, very much at the entry level, it can be taught on site. And at TruNorth, we provide $1,000, training and education budget to every employee to use on whatever they think they need to advance their career and their education and training. So training and education is a huge part of this.
Marty's rock climbing comment just hit home. I'm going rock climbing this weekend. So so we, just like Marty said, for us, the biggest, where we're hiring the most right now is electricians, and we're taking people and we're putting them right into apprenticeship programs. We've got people that are sitting for their journeyman's test, just like Marty said. A big thing for people that want to get into installing solar is something called the NABCEP certification, NABCEP. That's a big thing. It just trains you on how to be an installer. That's a huge thing to have on a resume if you're looking for an installation job. Hiring electricians. The whole market is looking for more electricians, more journeyman electrician jobs is tough to find.
The reality is there's really, in the clean energy space, there's just about every kind of job you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
From marketing to business. We're hiring data scientists to comb through data to make our systems run more effective, more efficient, us make good decisions on the kinds of plant operations. I would say if you're looking at the clean energy space, it's going to be increasingly electrified. So electrical engineering, anything around electrical technician, controls, that's a big area. Data, that's a big area. Electrician,
HVAC, yeah.
HVAC. I mean, anything that's going to touch the building space is you're going to have to transition building systems. In existing buildings or new buildings, increasingly are going to be electrified, and lots of data and controls.
Great. Well, thank you all for your expertise and your time today. I thought it was a great presentation. I'm going to end quick with our upcoming events. So next week we have our legislative preview. So looking into what our next session will contain. And we have a great panel with Commerce Commissioner Arnold, and then Senator Senjum and Representative Long. So I encourage you all to join that on a Tuesday morning. And for any members on the call, we'll have a lunch and learn on diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices coming up in December. Thank you all for your time today. I hope you enjoyed our presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.